To quote Oscar Wilde, I may not agree with you, but I will defend to death the right to make a fool out of yourself. The liberty of expression, freedom of speech, the right of an individual to articulate one's opinions and ideas without the fear of retaliation, censorship, or legal sanction. A right that should be given to everyone. A core pillar in the human's entitlement to all the other rights. However, there resides a double standard in this liberty. The scarcely justified principle that grants and favors a particular group an unequal amount of privilege at the expense of another. Freedom of speech should not have double standards, as it opposes its definition, it silences its people, and it does not equate to freedom of consequences.
Freedom of speech is a basic human right given to the citizens of a country. The application of double standards on freedom of speech negates its totality as a right for all. Freedom of speech was created for individuals to express oneself. However, societal inequities restrict the true definition of freedom of speech by selectively giving it only to those who are deemed acceptable in society. Double standards have been prevalent for a long time. In social classes, gender, racial groups, and many more. The oppressed experience privilege disparity and foundational bigotry. Double standards coincide with discrimination and inequality. This exists with every unequal majority and minority. Having a double standard undermines the integrity and effectiveness of the principle itself.
If all mankind minus one were of one opinion, mankind would be no more justified in silencing that one person than he. If he had the power, would be justified in silencing mankind. John Stuart Mill, a philosopher from the 19th century, a statement being popular does not make it a fact. A statement being obscure does not make it less credible. There should be no standard or metric in determining the truthfulness of ideas when it comes to freely expressing one's thoughts. Double standards being present in the freedom of speech prevents people to communicate freely. This especially becomes harmful when the marginalized and disadvantaged are put on the uneven playing field, further fortifying one's oppression and discrimination. Freedom of speech should not be limited, regardless of what minority one might belong to. One should not be silenced. The right to speech reinforces all the other rights. The roots of problems will never be addressed when the perspectives and experiences of others are not taken into full account. This right to speech reinforces all the other rights. This foundation is meant to be upheld. Freedom of speech should not be restricted. The notion of this right does not change the legality of other laws. There are some who are refused the right to speech. There is a fine line in the words that are meant to incite harm. One cannot accurately judge another's intentions. There is no person in charge of deciding what is right or wrong. One should internalize that the right to free speech is not absolute and that it must be exercised responsibly and with consideration for the negative consequences in the form of social ostracism, loss of employment, or other forms of retribution from private individuals or organizations. Freedom of speech does not license felonies, it does not get rid of the responsibility one gets for committing crimes, and all expressions are accounted for an appropriate consequence.
There are instances where this freedom is restricted. For example, the government is required to prohibit hate speech and incitement. This can also be justified when they protect the specific public interests or the rights and reputation of others. However, this must be implemented only when there is a need for it. As this law, which is called freedom of speech, was formed to allow people to express their thoughts, restricting this law without the need is unjust. Written in the Free Speech Clause, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. It does not aim to protect a person, which was not stated. rather for Congress to not be able to alter. It is evident in this that the government cares about freedom of speech only when it is convenient. To support this, last June 28, 2022, the Security and Exchange Commission released an order confirming its decision to revoke Rappler Holdings Corporation's Certificate of Incorporation. This is due to the company's robust reporting on Duterte's administration and its constant human rights violations. This exhibits the abuse of power and double standards happening in the government. People should understand that there are specific situations where freedom of speech is inappropriate. However, this does not permit the authorities to abuse their power.
The existing double standards that come with external factors affecting the right to freedom of speech go against this definition, restricts the ability of people to express themselves, and it either way still does not forfeit the responsibilities one gets from committing felonies. The right to protect and defend yourself is a necessity. Prejudice remains. The outnumbered are not given the same amount of privilege one might get, and the right to freedom of speech continues to get diminished. Some cite freedom of speech as a value one may withhold, but the distribution of freedom of speech to only a select group of people would only allow the monopoly of power to develop. It is much similar to being silenced by anyone. As we all know, discrimination, war, and genocide are the manifestations of the aftermath of silence. Double standards are the demise of freedom of speech. Should an individual be deprived of the right to speech? This concept of freedom of speech as a value that is used only when one gets an advantage from it should be reconstructed. The double standards in freedom of speech must be demolished.